ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च। श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं त्वं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरद्विषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। सर्वशास्त्राब्धि पीयूषा सर्ववैदिक सत्फला सर्वसिद्धांत रत्नाढ्य सर्वलोकैकदृक्प्रदा सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवतं प्रभो कलिध्वान्तोदितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तिता। Reading from Canto 11, Chapter 14, Text 28. Tasmadasad abhidhyanam yatha swapnamanoratham hitva mai samadhatsva manomadbhavabhavitam. Tasmadasad abhidhyanam yatha swapnamanoratham हित्वा मयि समाधत्स्व मनोमद्भावभावितम्। तस्मादसदभिध्यानम् यथा स्वप्नमनोरथम् हित्वा मयि समाधत्स्व मनोमद्भावभावितम्। Mataji's. Tasmat, therefore, asat, material, abhidhyanam, processes of elevation which absorb one's attention. Yatha, just as, swapna, in a dream, manah ratham, mental concoction, hitva, giving up, mai, in me, samadhatsva, completely absorb, manaha, the mind, mat bhava, by consciousness of me, bhavitam, purified. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Lila Prabhu. Therefore, one should reject all material processes of elevation which are like the mental creations of a dream, and should completely absorb one's mind in me. By constantly thinking of me, one becomes purified. Purport. The word bhavitam means caused to be. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, material existence is an unstable platform subject to the constant disturbances of creation and annihilation. One who absorbs his consciousness in Krishna, however, attains to Krishna's nature and is therefore described as Mad Bhav Bhavitam, or one situated in real existence because of Krishna consciousness. The Lord here concludes his analysis of different processes of human perfection. So this chapter, in which Lord Krishna is explaining the yoga system, it begins with a question by Uddhava. Uddhavji is asking a question that out of the various processes of elevation that you have described, please tell me which is the best, the one thing which is the best, which I should practice. And he's basically asking, are all these processes equally important, or one of them is supreme, one of them is better? And in this verse, Lord Sri Krishna concludes his answer, and therefore he's using the word tasmad, therefore. Interestingly, the Lord did not mention a practice to be a certain practice as the supreme, but he is mentioning the effect that one's consciousness has to be absorbed in Him totally. So the theme that I am making an attempt here to discuss, although I'm falling short of it every single moment, but let us discuss. So the theme that I thought of just sharing is absorption is the key to perfection. Now, if you look at this theme per se, absorption is the key to perfection, it's a universal principle. It's not just applicable to spiritual life and spiritual subject matters, but even materially it kind of applies. Absorption leads to perfection. So one has, in the goal of spiritual life, the idea is one has to completely absorb one's consciousness in Krishna. And the way to do it is by practicing remembering Him. And the Lord, in the current verse, Lord gives the end result and the means of achieving it as well. So He is mentioning both the things. That the idea is to completely absorb one's mind in me. How do you do that? By constantly thinking of me. One becomes purified. So first, he's saying, asat abhidhyanam, one should reject all material processes of elevation, and he compares them to the mental creations of a dream. Asat abhidhyanam. And in the previous verses, he has spoken about the limitations, and several places in the Bhagavatam, the limitations of karma and jnana in terms of giving the ultimate perfection of life is being mentioned. Now in Kali Yuga, it is very difficult with our current level of understanding and experience and the lack of cultural background. It's even difficult to appreciate what karma and jnana actually means. Even to understand that, it requires a certain level of elevation. And oftentimes, we do become victims of these kind of mentalities, the mindsets. So karma, basically, if you look at from one vision, it can be explored from different angles of vision, but karma from one angle is expertise at gross matter. You basically learn to manipulate gross matter very effectively, gain results, get some achievements, get some recognition based on how well you manipulate gross matter. So that becomes karma. And jnana, if you look at from one perspective, is manipulation of subtle energies, knowledge acquiring senses, and basically mental speculation and your ability to elucidate a certain subject matter in a certain manner. And time and again we have been warned that such kind of pursuits in itself, they can be good vehicles, but they are not the passengers of the vehicle. The passenger of the vehicle which is supposed to go to Krishna is the consciousness of the jiva. Through karma and jnana, one might take his consciousness back to the Supreme Lord, but they in themselves are fruitless in the sense they would not fill up the vacuum. So the jiva, the vacuum that he experiences in the heart, it cannot be fulfilled by either external achievements in terms of wealth, in terms of, fame that comes, as well as the subtle achievements in terms of expertise at manipulating knowledge and manipulating information, how well you present it. And you can actually see some of the most depressed community on the planet live in universities. Honestly speaking, some of the most depressed communities, they live in universities. And often we keep hearing that in all these prestigious universities, they have most of the suicides, unfortunately, which happen in many of these prestigious universities are PhD students. And I was talking to one of the PhD students from IIT Bombay, and I said, why do you think that happens? He said, many times people spend just 3 hours defining a problem. And therefore, they get so much exasperated that they don't even have a problem which is credible enough to solve. They kind of try to solve the ultimate problems by the temporary solution, they just hang themselves. It's quite a common occurrence. Every year we have at least one or two. So we can see that just the pursuit of jnana cannot actually make you, like I have whatever, because of where I was earlier, we have interacted with a lot of professors who were like very well accomplished in their area. But often you find they are very irritable. They're quite irritable not because of pride actually, but that irritation in my experience had been because of their frustration. They had dedicated their life 25, 30 years to a certain subject matter and they know in and out and they still feel the vacuum. And here they are to give confidence to another budding enthusiast, to give that confidence that you will be able to find that solution, which I haven't been able to in 30 years. It's quite a frustrating experience. It's quite a frustrating experience. You can't even explain it to anybody because the envy is so strong. Because if you live in a community where breeds envy, sharing hearts is impossible. And then that starts developing internally even more and creates problems. So karma and jnana has their own inherent limitation. It breeds envy, it breeds ego, it breeds pride and all those things. And more these tendencies exist in one's spiritual practices, the similar kind of repercussions come as well. So Shastras time and again have very emphatically described that don't just pursue them although they appear very lucrative. Bhagavad bhakti hinasya jati shastra tapas japas tapaha apranasya dehasya mandanam lokaranjanam. It is said that person's noble birth is studying the Vedas and all those chanting of the mantras. If they are bereft of devotion, they are like decorations of a dead body. I remember hearing this verse for the first time from His Grace Paramhams Prabhu, when he used to come to our hostel room at Indian Institute of Science, and he was a classic personality, the way he presented Krishna consciousness, and he mentioned this verse once. Naturally, it referred to what all we were doing. You know, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya. If your pursuit of knowledge is without devotion, then it becomes Apranasyeva Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. And very graphically, I clearly remember, for almost 15 minutes he explained graphically how sometimes people decorate the funeral procession. He said, but the person who is on that, on that, what do you call, bed which is being carried, he can't even appreciate, neither can relish that decoration. So he says, Apranasyeva Dehasya. So you may have them, but it won't have any kind of effect on you. In the sense, it will be just immaterial. You will not be able to enjoy it. And not only that, they miss the essence or are insubstantial, they are temporary. And in the field of karma and jnana, if you look at, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has very elaborately discussed in the first shower of Madhurya Kadambini. We don't have time to go through all the details, but the practitioner as well as the achievements are temporary and subjected to time factor. So we see that Prahlad Maharaj, very categorically, seeing the example of a very accomplished karmi, he's right in the very beginning of his prayers to Narsingh Dev, he's saying, Manne dhana bhijana rupa tapashrutojas teja prabhava bala paurusha buddhi yoga naradhana hi bhavanti parasya pumsho bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayuttapaya. That, my dear Lord, I understand very clearly that all these achievements are not going to satisfy you unless you have achieved this sense of bhakti. You may have all of that. If you look at Prahlad's life, he had all of that stuff. Dhana, abhijana, rupa, tapa, shrutaujas, everything he had. He was extremely learned, extremely intelligent, extremely, wealthy and everything else. But what made him dear to Narsingadev and not his father? He practically externally, Hiranyakashipu had everything, Prahlad had everything what Hiranyakashipu had. But Prahlad had one extra thing, which was Bhagavad Bhakti. And that's what made him dear to Krishna. And such progress doesn't last, it finishes with death. Right? So in the Rudra Gita, I believe this verse comes, Shulle lihano. It's just like a frog might become inattentive to the presence of the snake, but the snake at the right time captures the frog. Similarly, the time factor, the living entity might become oblivious to the passage of the time factor, but the time factor is not oblivious to the activities of the jiva, and it captures. Death approaches, death comes. Right? Recently in our Kartik Yatra, we had, I think it was a penultimate day when Maharaj did that 2 hours kirtan. So just during the lecture, we received a call from Italy that one of the very senior devotees was very sick. And so then we passed on a message to Maharaj. Maharaj even announced during the kirtan, and that day he did almost 1 hour 45 minutes kirtan. It was like historical. I mean, in the yatra everybody relished it. In the evening, Maharaj spoke to the family members of, this particular Vaishnava, who's very senior and has been consistent service. And then after the talk, Maharaj came out of his room, and His Holiness Radha Swami Maharaj, he was saying that just yesterday, this great Vaishnava was, doing such nice kirtan. He had exhilarated the whole community, and he was performing this Govardhan Puja. It was so beautiful experience, was so absorbed. And just today morning, suddenly he got this brain hemorrhage kind of thing. And he was in coma. And as Maharaj spoke to him, almost at that time, the machines started rattling on the phone, and everybody thought that he's just about to leave. And after a couple of hours, he left. And Maharaj, he came out of his room, handed the phone, and he said, Kamala Dalla Jalla. Our life is like that, just like a water droplet tottering on a leaf of a lotus flower. Kamala Dala Jala, Jivana Dalmal. So these acquisitions, they actually go away with the progress of time. So Krishna is warning that asat abhidhyanam, don't unnecessarily either find shelter. You may get them, but that we can help ourselves by avoiding taking shelter of them. That's not our shelter. That could be our acquisition, but not our shelter. So he's saying one should completely absorb one's mind in me. So the why. Why should one absorb one's mind in Krishna? So first of all, it is the constitutional position of the jiva. That's what we are very good at. We may be not expert at certain things, but as a jiva, as a part and parcel of Krishna, we are very expert at remembering Krishna. Not in our current state, but in our normal, natural state. The Bhagavatam says when Shukdev Goswami in the very beginning, as I say, opening overs of his innings, he's explaining, Tasmat sarvatmana rajan hari sarvatra sarvada shrotavya kirtitavyascha smartavyo bhagavan nirnam. And Prabhupada uses the word, the business of the living entity. Very nice word, he says. The business of the living entity is to always remember the Supreme Lord in every circumstance. The Lord should be heard about, glorified, and remembered by all human beings. And I was thinking why this sequence is always used. Shrotavya, kirtitavyascha, and smartavya. If you look at Prahlad Maharaj also, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Seems like there is a logical connection between the three. So when we do Shravanam, we hear. But if you just hear, it often happens, like honestly speaking, personal life, we hear so much, but we still don't remember. We sometimes fail to remember. So he's saying Shravanam, Kirtanam. So Kirtanam is, popularly translated as sharing it with others, doing Krishna Katha, telling others. And I was trying to reflect, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes we preach to the whole world and we want to transform everybody, but we forget to preach to ourselves. And because of that missing link, remembrance doesn't happen. We become good speakers, but not good rememberers. We tend to, transform others, but forget to transform ourselves. I remember when we were in VTA, it's almost quite some time, and Gauram Prabhu once was mentioning, he said that in spiritual life you should not become like a serving spoon, which is continuously distributing halwa without tasting a iota of it. You should relish it and then distribute it. That's what the Panchatattva did. That's the blueprint. If you can't relish it, it will not be long enough that you won't be able to distribute it. So the idea is relish it and distribute it, and then remembrance happens. Bhagavatam also says it's the highest perfection of life. The goal of life, whatever we do, is ante narayana smriti. Etavan sankhya yoga bhyam swadharma parinishtaya janma labha parapumsam ante narayana smriti. After you do everything, at the end of the day, at the end of the life, if you are not able to remember the Lord, it's actually a waste of time. And Bhagavatam also says it frees you from sin. In the 7th canto, when Narad Muni is having a discussion with Yudhishthira Maharaj, he gives a very nice analogy of how remembrance can transform your future. And he's giving an example of just like sometimes a grass worm gets confined in the hole of a wall, and he's fearful of the bee outside who is waiting to eat him up. So because of constantly thinking about the bee, out of fear, he transforms into a bee. So Narad Muni is saying, Evam Krishne Bhagavati Maya Manuja Ishvare Vairena Puta Papamana Tamapur Anuchintaya. That whether you think of the Lord as worshipable or as an enemy, you ultimately become purified because he's all pure. You become freed of all kind of sins because of constantly thinking about him. Smartavya satanam Vishnur Vismartavyo najatuchit Sarva vidhi nishedhayasyur etayoreva kinkara. This principle is the king of all principles, that we remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. What should one remember? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually asks Ramananda Rai in his celebrated conversation, what should one remember? So he's saying, Kahar smarana jiva kariba anukshan? My dear Ramananda Rai, please tell what the jiva should remember always. And Ramananda Rai very succinctly puts it, Krishna Nam Guna Lila Pradhana Smaran. One should remember Krishna's names, qualities and pastimes. And that is the chief object of remembrance. And if you do the first properly, if we do the first properly, the others will automatically follow. In the sense, if we hear and chant Krishna's names clearly. Holy name. How should one remember? That is the question being asked. So Narada Muni says, Tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishna niveshayet. Somehow or other, you figure out. Somehow or other, just remember Krishna. This somehow or other needs some explanation actually, because so he is giving example of 5 ways, and there could be more ways of remembering the Lord, but we will try to draw the principle. He says, Kama dveshat bhayat snehad yatha bhakteshware manaha aveshyatad agham hitva bhavastad gatim gata. Bhavo. Many people have attained liberation by remembering Krishna in so many ways. He says, out of lust, out of hatred, out of fear, out of affection, or out of normal devotion. And then he gives example of the gopis, of Kamsa, of Shishupal, of Pandavas, and of himself as an example of showing that how they attain perfection by focusing their mind upon Krishna. What we can draw as a principle, we might most likely be falling in the category of sadhana bhakti, where we are trying to remember Krishna where there is difficulty. But what would help us, what might help us remember him in a progressively better manner, is a feeling of an emotional connect with Krishna. See, we don't remember things to which we are not emotionally connected. You walk on the street, you see so many people, when you come back, you don't think about them. Correct? A young boy walking on a street, he sees a young beautiful girl, he feels a connect with her. Therefore, when he comes back, or whatever, he just keeps thinking about her. Gross example, but the principle. So when you have an emotional connect, then you remember. Remembrance is not a function, not necessarily a function of physical proximity, but emotional proximity. We might be living in an arena of physical proximity with Krishna and his tadiya, but if you're not in emotional proximity with Krishna, remembrance won't happen. Remembrance won't happen. There might be recognition, but not remembrance. Recognition in the sense, we understand, oh, Krishna is standing here, his arati is going on, but then I exit the temple hall and then I don't think about him. Remembrance comes when I feel emotionally for the Lord. There is an emotional connect with Krishna. So, therefore, what the illusory energy can do is, she doesn't have to necessarily disturb our externals. She can achieve her ambition, she can achieve her, not ambition, she can achieve her function, but just disturbing our internals. So we might still continue to live in a beautiful association of devotees, but if you're not internally connected, emotionally connected with Vaishnavas, with Krishna, Maya can get you to do what she wants you to do. We can actually become her instrument. So the damage is deeper and complete on the mental plane. And once you start hating devotees, the root of the process is already cut. It's just a matter of time that the tree will fall. Right? So Maya will not necessarily have to uproot the tree. She has to just poison the roots. So she can, she's not like such a devil kind of personality, but Kali, and she kind of tests. And we then make our wrong choices. We choose to become belligerent and hateful of devotees, but then that starts rotting the roots. The tree might be very big, everyone might glorify, but the tree's roots are rotting because of his hatred towards Vaishnavas, and therefore it falls off. So as His Holiness Devamrita Swami Maharaj wrote a beautiful book called Bhakti Bhav, where he's speaking very elaborately about experiencing emotions of a devotee in Krishna consciousness, which is very important. It is not a feel-good philosophy, it's a reality, because we see Narada Muni is giving examples of emotions. They are experiencing these emotional exchanges with Krishna. And everyone may or may not have that same reciprocation with the Lord, but they felt like that towards the Lord, and still they got purified and moved forward. So we need to experience emotional connect with Krishna, which is quite far. Feeling emotional connect with Krishna is quite far, but we can begin with devotees and start to experience them as, part of our, or we make ourselves part of their lives, and that protects us from the illusory energy. So, several places in the Bhagavatam there is description of how this principle is being emphasized, that even if you remember the Lord out of envy, out of hatred, you will still get purified, and you will move forward, and for a better destination. Yes, you may not get rasa. The mellows of exchange may or may not come. That could be some exceptional cases, but you get definitely a position where you are freed from the influence of the modes, and you can further start developing your Krishna consciousness. That's why many demons go to Brahman. They go to Brahman realization. Very few exceptional people like Shishupal or Putana, she had an emotional connect with Krishna. She felt like a mother towards the child, and that emotional connect lifted her up. Not just the fact that she came to poison and she was killed by Krishna, but she felt an emotional connect with Krishna. And over and above that, she had some sort of envy because of her Aghasur and Bakasur being killed. But Krishna picked up that was the handle through which Krishna lifted her up into the association of his eternal associates, this emotional connect that she experienced. So it need not be, artificial, that, from today onwards I'll think like that and think like, no, we don't have to do that. But it's organic. We can begin with devotees. We can begin with where we are and then move forward from there. I'm tempted to say this, but I don't know if it is, you can forgive me for this, but I remember long time back, there was a Hollywood movie, and it's called Inception. How about that? Inception, where the whole idea was about not damaging a person on a physical level, but going and damaging his subconscious realities. And then his externals change. I don't know if somebody watched that movie, but I kind of read about it at that time. More subtler than that is what illusory energy does with us. And that person doesn't know that's what is happening with him. But the subconscious reality is changed, and he starts thinking that what he thinks is actually reality. And that's what exactly illusory energy can do to us, creates perceptions and projections. So Krishna is saying, by constantly thinking of me, one becomes purified. Mano mad bhava bhavitam. So how does one get to this point of constant remembrance about Krishna? How does it happen? So there are stages in development. In Nectar of Instruction, verse number 8, Srila Prabhupada in his purport gives these 5 stages of how one develops progressive remembrance of Krishna. Tannam rupa charitadi sukirtananu smartyo kramena rasanam manasi niyojya tishthan vraje tadanuragi jananugame kalam nayed akhilam ityupadesha saram. So Prabhupada writes in that purport, he says, the first stages for the development of constant remembrance of Krishna is Shravana Dasha, the stage of hearing about Krishna. And Prabhupada says, in the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha, right? Shravana Dasha. And when one does that, very interestingly, Prabhupada uses this word. He says, by constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his form, qualities and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance. And that is called Varandasha. And when one attains this stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. He really likes to, he looks forward to hearing about Krishna. So what is this Varandasha? Varandasha, we have, if you look at the life of Narad Muni, we see this. When he constantly heard about Krishna from the Bhakti Vedantis and applied himself to the process, he gets a realization that I am different from this gross and subtle existence, and so is the Lord. That is Varanadasha. When we begin to understand that the Lord's position is factual. It is not imaginary. Right now it's an intellectual conviction that we carry in our heads. It's an intellectual conviction that we carry. We have certain kind of Shraddha, but we don't have realization of this fact that Krishna is factual. That one day, some of us can be sitting face to face with the Lord and conversing. That kind of faith, that kind of factual reality, It's like having a memory of gulab jamun and eating a gulab jamun are two different things. Right? Memory will not let you, it's different from the reality. Of course, Krishna's remembrance has the same effect as Krishna's physical presence. But this stage of acceptance comes when you when we constantly hear about Krishna, the purification takes place. Shranvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridantastuya bhadrani vidunoti suratsatam. Someone was asking me, he said, what should I do in order to be God conscious? So he was a new guy, we were doing a journey of self-discovery course. And I was telling them that, it's like if there is a boiling pan of water, and if I drop a coin in it, can you see it? He said, no, if it is really highly boiling, there is just bubbles on its surface, you can't see it. He said, can you pick it out? He said, no, that's also not possible. I'll have bad experience if I try to do that. I'll burn my fingers and I start cursing the water. Although it was my misjudgment to put my hand into the water at the time when it is boiling over. He says, what you should do? He said, let it cool off. He said, what will you do to cool off? He said, switch off the gas. He said, that is switching off passion and ignorance. Right? The process is very simple. A simple lady cooking in the kitchen can tell you how bhakti works. So you have to switch off this flame, so passion and ignorance get settled. So that is the 4 regulative principles. Switch off the flame and then be patient. The cool breeze has to cool down this water. That is association of devotees. So this water gets cooled down, gets settled. This water is your mind. And when the mind becomes calm and composed, you don't have to do anything external. You actually see the coin at the base. And not only you see it, but now you can actually lift it as well. And therefore Krishna says in the Gita, one whose mind is already controlled, super soul is already reached. What does that mean? The ruffle has settled. You can actually see him. So we don't have to run here and there. Work on ourselves. Work on this mind which is creating trouble. Let the ruffle settle down. You can actually see Krishna present. So one accepts Lord's position as factual and he understands his own subordinate positions. He understands, I'm insignificant. I'm not irrelevant. I'm insignificant. Because irrelevance, this feeling of irrelevance will take us to low self-esteem and we stop serving Krishna. But the sense of insignificance will lead us to humility and empower us to serve Krishna. So we don't have to go to the level of irrelevancy. Like many times people have this feeling, I'm not enough. But that's not humility actually, that's inferiority complex. Right? I'm small, but I'm worthy of the opportunity of serving Krishna and we're grateful for it and we move forward. So one of the chief obstacles in hearing, I was trying to say, is false ego. Because the living entity, the jiva, is attached to his own plans of achieving glory. He's just attached to his own plans of achieving glory. And as long as he's attached, he cannot relish someone else's glorious deeds. If you're constantly thinking of, let me get recognition, let me get recognition, let me get recognition, it's difficult to actually see somebody else getting it. Even to recognize that someone else deserves recognition becomes very difficult. So false ego creates a big hurdle. So hearing needs humility. And for humility to arise, we need to accept the reality. So when one comes to Varanadasha, this stage of acceptance, one becomes humble and then hearing actually begins. And before you accept, the reality is that after all I am not so great. And that's quite a revelation for the jiva to understand that I am not so great. So acceptance helps us deal with reality and move forward in a positive manner. Because we don't have to be perfect, we need to feel progress. We don't have to be perfect. We have to just feel the progress. Where I was yesterday, am I moving forward? We can be happy about other people winning their race, but as long as our eyes are fixed on other people's race, we will miss our own finish lines. We will not be inspired to actually keep running our race. So we become happy on other people running their race. We are happy that they run and win their race, but we are also happy that I am getting to run on the turf and is still on the way to achieve my goal. Keep running. Other success and failure will not impede you unless you want it to. So when one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of smarana avastha, the stage of remembering, where Prabhupada talks about 5 stages: recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and samadhi, trance. They're like progressive stages of milk being converted into rabadi. Further stages, it becomes intense, and sweeter. And he says, after some smarana dasha or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position, his relationship with Krishna, and that is called sampatti dasha, the perfection of life. You actually get your sampatti, your real wealth of your relationship with Krishna gets revealed, and that is the greatest acquisition, that is the perfection of life. But it's not that easy. We have obstacles in absorption. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, Mana dushta hoile nahe Krishnera smaran, Krishna smriti vinu hoye nishfala jivan. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, when one's mind is polluted, it is very difficult to remember Krishna. And when remembrance of Lord Krishna is hampered, one's life is imperfect. So mind can get polluted by various things, and sins is one thing, but is not the main thing. Sin is one thing, but that's not the main thing for polluting the mind. That can be handled. But the feeling of envy that the jiva carries and which manifests in form of grudges, judgmentalism, fault finding, these are serious pollutions of the mind which can go on impeding the progress of a spiritual practitioner for quite a long time. So Krishna had explained in the Gita, Vit Rag Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mam Upashita Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Putamad Bhava Magata. That in order to come to me, you have to deal with these three things: attachment, fear, and anger. So attachment to material conception of life. Even though we chant Hare Krishna, we are still attracted by sense objects. And Krishna has nowhere said that you will be able to perfectly control the mind, or lust will disappear, and this and that. Right? Shaknoti va yash shodum prak sharir vimokshanat kam krod udhvam vegam sayukta sasukhi nara. Till death one has to tolerate the urges of lust, anger and greed. Krishna is very clear about it. You have to tolerate a lot. But he gives handles also of how to do it through higher taste. So we are still distracted with sense objects, and one of the symptoms of anishtita bhajan is his Vishaya Sangar. Vishaya Sangar is the stage where the practitioner understands sense gratification is bad for me, but still he is attracted to it. In spite of knowing it's bad for me, still he is attracted, and he helplessly does it out of habit or out of this hope that maybe after I do this, my desires will be over. Let me just do it this once, and then I won't have to revert back to this kind of activity. So Krishna gives in the 15th chapter, Asanga Shastrena Dridhena Chitva. You have to be kind of little blunt in terms of cutting this attachment with the weapon of, detachment. With the weapon of detachment, you have to cut this root of material existence. Like when they treat you, when they do a little surgical operation, in Yatra I had some problem in my finger, so Akshar Gaurang Prabhu and his, brother-in-law, so they said, okay, we'll have to do some minor surgery on your finger, and they put 3 injections on the base of my finger, just to make it numb. And then they pressed it out. So similarly, when we come to the association of devotees, detachment becomes a pleasing process. It's not that something we think about it too much. They make you oblivious of those attachments by making you experience a higher taste. But if you try to do that without that, or even worse, with a sour feeling towards Vaishnavas, then detachment is not possible actually. Rather, we start attracting the same sense objects back, because the jiva is looking for rasa. So one develops a higher taste, one can give up attachment. Fear. So fear is, Prabhupada explains in the purport, just to put it, the fear of bad experience of serving in this world creates an impediment in moving towards Krishna. We start thinking, if I have to serve in this society, the similar kind of moods and swings will come, and I'm not interested. I don't want to get involved. And God forbid, if the bad experiences happen in devotional life while serving, then the kind of roadblocks it creates are phenomenal internally in trying to move forward. So we have to develop good relationships in devotional circles, and even people outside are trying to recognize the importance of good relationships. And survival in devotional communities is not based on expertise, but those who balance expertise with the healthy lubricant of good relationships. When our expertise is well lubricated, otherwise the machine is just going to make a lot of sound, heat and fire. ultimately burn. But when it is well lubricated with good relationships, it gives output, which is very pleasing. So that fear, we can work on that fear by developing good relationships. And anger comes because of confusions and contradictions, of frustration of one's plan. And even when we come to devotional service, sometimes we make a plan for ourselves. Okay, now 5 years here, 10 years down the line, this is where, out of the 9 stages of devotional service, this is where I will be. And Adav Shraddha, Tata Sadhu Sangha, Bhajan Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, and we kind of put a time frame. It doesn't happen like that. So one gets, therefore, Rupa Goswami says, Utsahat, Nishchaya, Dhairya. All 3 qualities have to be present while making spiritual progress. So, one has to also practice, it kind of helps to be detached a little bit. Just like Pandavas, when they saw Krishna has disappeared, they knew Kali is spreading. But still they give up their palace and move off. Be detached. He says, there is certain thing we can do beyond this. It is the time factor. Krishna has his plan. We are not the controllers. We did what we were supposed to do. It was our responsibility. Now probably it's the time was to move on. And Krishna will make some arrangements for it to be taken care. So they manifested such level of detachment as well. So our journey is from this distraction to absorption in Krishna. And Krishna in the 12th chapter of Gita, he explains, what if you are not able to remember me and focus your mind and intelligence completely in me? Then he gives various stages. He said, okay, Abhyas yogena tato mam ichhaptum dhananjaya. If you perform regulative practices of devotional service, you won't attain me, but you will attain a desire to attain me. Mam ichhaptum dhananjaya. The desire, the intense desire to attain Krishna will come, and that desire will impel our mind and intelligence to get completely absorbed in Krishna, which will ultimately lift us into his association. So the abhyas should ultimately then lead, kind of move towards the direction of progressive remembrance of the Lord. Actually, I don't have, we just have 4 minutes. I was like reading because this, somehow this topic interests me, about focusing the mind on an object, and the field of yoga which kind of masters this is Dhyana Yoga. So I was trying to read something from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras about what helps to focus the mind upon the object of meditation. So object of meditation, we are very clear. Radha, Gopinath, your worshipable deities, Krishna's holy names, instructions of Guru. And then what can impede and what can help. So I'll just run through it, and we might discuss in some other time, some other forums. So distractions and obstacle which hinders the aspirant's practice of focusing his mind on his object of meditation, for us Krishna. He says first is Vyadhi. He gives 9 things which hinders one's meditation upon the object of meditation. First is Vyadhi. Vyadhi means ill health or sickness. And he says, we see that Maharaj Kulshekhar very beautifully. When I was reading this verse came to my mind. Why is he praying like this? Krishna tvadiya padapankaja panjarantam adyevame vishatu manasa raja hamsa Pran prayana samaye kafavat pittai kantavarodhana vidau smaranam kutaste. So personality like him is saying that when my body is diseased, I will not be able to focus my mind on you, my dear Lord. Therefore, I try to do it now. So Vyadhi is the first. Second he says is Stayan. Stayan is fatigue, weariness. We are just too tired. And he says such a person has no goal, no path to follow, and no enthusiasm. Somebody who's just tired, either mentally or physically, he doesn't seem to execute any enthusiasm. Now, all these things might apply to sadhaka stage. People who are perfected might transcend all of that, even if they have body disease, so that it doesn't apply to them. Excuse me for that. It doesn't apply to personalities who are perfected beings. And he says his mind and intellect become dull due to inactivity, and their faculties rust. And Bhagavatam Prabhu was yesterday telling me this one quote from the recent ACM, which he heard, which I think Janva Mataji made in that panel discussion. And she said, it's better to wear down than to rust. She said, it's better to wear down than to rust. So, So he says, this kind of lack of enthusiasm happens because of his languor. Third is samshaya. Samshaya is faithless and doubter. And he says the seeker should have faith in his goal, in his master, in his process, and then move forward with that determination. Fourth is pramada. Interesting. He says a person suffering from pramada is full of self-importance, lacks any humility, and believes that he alone is wise. So basically here we start identifying with our, kind of opinions a lot. That this is my opinion, this is how things should be done. So that is pramada. And no doubt he knows what is right or wrong, but he persists in his indifference to the right and chooses what is pleasant. To gratify his selfish passions and dreams of personal glory, he will deliberately and without scruple sacrifice everyone who stands in his way. Such a person is blind to God's glory and deaf to his words. So that is pramada. Then he can't focus upon Krishna. Fifth he says is alasya. Right? So alasya, he says, should be overcome by enthusiasm. And he says the attitude of an aspirant should be like that of a lover ever yearning to meet the beloved, but never giving way into despair. And he says, I like this line, he says, hope should be his shield and courage his sword. And he moves forward with unflagging enthusiasm. Sixth he says is avirati. This is the tremendous craving for sensory object after they had been consciously abandoned. Still that craving remains, which is hard to restrain. So that is same as Vishaya Sangar. Seventh he says is Bhranti Darshan. Bhranti Darshan means a person afflicted by false knowledge suffers from delusion and believes that he alone has seen the true light. He has a powerful intellect but lacks humility and makes a show of wisdom. That is Bhranti Darshan. And he says the solution is remain in the association of great souls. They will bring down your Bhranti Darshan, this weakness. Eighth he says is Alabdha Bhumi Katva. And he says just like a mountain climber tries to climb the mountain but fails to reach the summit because of lack of stamina, similarly a person who cannot overcome the inability to concentrate is unable to seek reality. Right? It's like sometimes, you hear a kirtan tune and you think you know the tune, and then you sit with a musical instrument and you're not able to recollect that particular tune which you wanted to sing. So that is like Alabdha Bhumikatva. He is not able, he understands but he just can't apply it. Similar as Niyamakshama in our Anishtita Bhajan. And ninth he says is Anavasthitatva. He says he gets some achievements, he is happy about it, he is proud about it, but he becomes slack in his practice. Abhi to mil gaya mere ko. He becomes slack in his practice, sadhana bhakti, and therefore he starts drifting away. So he says even at this last stage, continuous endeavor is essential, and he has to pursue the path with infinite patience and determined perseverance, and never show slackness. Like in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, when Jad Bharat is explaining the forest of material enjoyment, and he says, this river of material existence is very swift at the ends. At both the banks of the river, this river is very, very swift because of anger and lust or something, that even the spiritual practitioner who is about to cross out, he gets toppled over at that stage. It's very swift. And then he says, to overcome the obstacles, he says 4 things are helpful in overcoming these 9 obstacles. And I'll quickly just take your permission, 2 minutes and finish this. He says first is Maitri. Develop good relationships. This Patanjali is saying. Develop good relationship, friendliness, not just externally, but really having that sort of atmiyata to your people around you. And the yogi cultivates this kind of thing and therefore reduces his enemy. So relationships. Second is karuna. Karuna, he says, is compassion with devoted action. Right? So he helps the weak to become stronger, and that helps him in his practice of yoga or his practice of trying to remember the Lord nicely. So compassion clubbed with active seva. Third is mudita. Mudita, he says, that when you see somebody else doing something, just feel exhilarated, feel delighted upon seeing someone else doing something wonderful. And by this he saves himself from envy and so many things which accrue because of jealousy. So third principle says is non-envy. And the fourth he says is upeksha. Now this is not merely a feeling of disdain or contempt for somebody who is fallen. He says it is a searching self-examination to find out how one would have behaved if I would have faced the same temptation. As this person who had fallen to a vice, how I would have behaved if I would have been confronted with the same temptation. So this is more of introspection. He understands his own faults first and then understand what others are going through. And by this self-study, he says, this person becomes charitable to all. He becomes concerned about others' welfare and he wants to do something for them. So these four aspects of relationships, compassion clubbed with active seva, non-envy, and introspection, he says, helps you overcome these various kinds of distractions in trying to remember the Lord. So distraction to absorption, that's life of sadhana bhakti, and ultimately absorption will lead to perfection. That's our hope and prayer. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana ki jai. Please forgive me if I sounded anywhere, kind of instructive, but this was meant for each and every one of us, and especially for myself. I seek